So far, so good. You have a good job.
Oh, yeah. Before I continue the topic that we started this morning, first I would like to add it on a little bit on the meditations. There are people who are relatively new in the meditation, and this may benefit for them. Of course, people who are doing meditation for a long time, there may not be new things to learn. So far, we have discussed, practically two kinds of meditation. Meditation, to cultivate what you call the shamatha, or still mental qualities of stillness and the clarity, and along that, I share with you to say that the tradition that I follow, rely on some of those great Indian masters. This cultivation of shamatha in the sense having mental state which has qualities of stillness and the clarity. And the first of all, it is good to choose or select an object of the meditation, and with regard to that, it can be individuals' mental dispositions, experiment few objects. Some are right here and now, such as breathing, such as sensations. Some are a little bit in an abstract, like a image. But it is up to the individuals, which are people who are interested to learn the varieties of the object of the meditation. I mentioned one of these Tsongkhapa's great treatise of the stages of the path to enlightenment, the extensive one, which has 3 volumes, and the last volume, somewhere relatively at the beginning, you will see. And this is one of the most, the extensive, the choice were given based on, some of those great Indian masters like Vasubandhu, also the Asanga, some of their writings, and very, very helpful. And this I already mentioned. So that is the one part. The second part is, to learn the tools, what kind of tools that we need, mindfulness and introspection, or the matter awareness. The second one, use a slightly different translation. There are other translations. So in Tibetan, Tempa, Shishin, those are the 2 main tools to along the meditation need to cultivate. In this case, Tempa refers to, has a particular function, that is, holding the object of the meditation that you have selected before, earlier. In this case, in this particular case, the function of the mindfulness is as simple as this. some of the great Indian masters have used, a very simple statement, to describe in this context, Tembani Mijibao. So the mindfulness in this context, mindfulness is, Mijeba, that means not losing the object of the meditation, not forgetting the object of the meditation. In other words, your mind holds or stays with the object of the meditation. That is the function of the mindfulness. And as I mentioned, initially, the main action is simply place your inner mind on the object of the meditation that you have selected. And that is stage. That stage is called jogpa. Place, or simply placing the mind. And this will take relatively a little bit longer time. Your mind may immediately stay away, moved away from the object of the meditation. And need patience. Here, patience and realistic mental states are very, very important. In terms of the obstacles, hindrances that we face are those two: excitation and laxity. In the early stage, it is excitation that we face. When the excitation, that easy to be distracted, when that is gradually reduced, then the what you call the laxity may occur frequently, or laxity will be the obstacle. So once you experience there is a decrease of what you call the stability. Stability in the sense your mind is not losing the object of the meditation that very frequently. If there is a decrease of what you call the stability, then slowly to plan or to work to have a duration. Initially, duration is not important. If you, right at the beginning, if you try to have a duration in the sense your mind stay with the object of the meditation for a minute, you will fail, particularly people who are new. So not to focus on having a duration, simply placing. The Tibetan term is jogpa. Whenever your mind is separated from the object of the meditation, without frustration, without a sense of failure, without sort of irritation, with the patience, bring back to the object of the meditation. And this will take a little bit of time. Shouldn't have it tense, be relaxed. I mean, I haven't mentioned all the body posture. You can learn from this. I mentioned a little bit how to put the cushion, creating the environment, sounding. These already I mentioned, but you can find these things from the. There are many sources you can find. So the second is Gyundu Jogpa in Tibetan. Gyundu Jogpa. Gyundu Jogpa, literally it means in a continuous placing your mind. So the function is to have a little bit duration. maybe a minute, if we are lucky. So that is here, it is. So along these two stages, so far we discussed, its main quality out of two qualities in the shamatha, single-pointed mind. Out of the two qualities, initial quality that need to be enhanced is stillness, stability, stability. Don't worry about clarity. Jopa, gyundu jopa, lende jopa. Once, you experience there is a what you call the duration, say a minute or 2 minutes, then to see that they're starting to need to find the quality of, in the duration, quality of stability. Say, if your mind is able to stay on the object of the meditation, say on your breathing, or image of Buddha, whatever you have selected, then see, okay, during this minute, is there any gap? There's a possible. We feel, my mind stay with the object of meditation a minute, but within that minute there are some gaps. That is, possible. So in the technical term, in the third stage is called lende jokpa. Jokpa, gyundu jokpa, lende jokpa. Lende jokpa, that means, if there's a gap, fill the gap. In a very early stage, that is important. To find the good quality of stability, try to right at the beginning not to have a gap. Even if there's only a minute, during that minute of your mind, that you experience stability, there's no gap. It is perfectly possible you feel your mind is with the object of the meditation, but it is already gone somewhere. That is here, third stage, lende jokpa. Jokpa, gyundu jokpa, lende jokpa. So these are something that you need to do. Initially, don't force to have to have a clarity or to have a long duration of, initially to have a good qualities of short, period of that your mind had stillness, stability. So the ones that you feel, yes, there is a qualities of stillness, and they have a duration, and in that duration, the minute or 2 minutes, less gap, then what you need to do, gradually, try to introduce monitoring, that is the introspection. To monitor whether your mind is really, your mindfulness is really holding the object or not. That is only, when you feel, yes, there is a qualities of stillness, also a duration, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, like that. Then, introduce the monitoring element, which is, the mental introspection. This introduction may cause a little bit, instability that you have cultivated earlier, and that is how the mind works, which I mentioned earlier. So then, go back to the previous earlier what you have done. Let keep it aside the introspection, just to stay on the object of the meditation. Once you are previous what you have gained, stillness with the quality. Once you're there, then once again gently to have the introspection, to introduce the introspection. And the function of introspection is simply to monitor whether there is a qualities of mindfulness or not. It is said, once our stillness and the clarities are reached at a certain level in the sense, the good qualities, then this second, this monitoring mental introspection doesn't need. It will, because it done its work. When the quality is there, then it doesn't need. So there are these kind of form of meditation, mainly to cultivate stability and the clarity, which I mentioned. The foundation, having these two qualities in our mental continuum is the foundation to do some other meditations, such as meditation that we briefly discussed at the second or the third afternoon. Try to experience the basic or the fundamental qualities or nature of the mind, consciousness, luminosity. I gave a brief, sort of explanation how to do that. Then we had the brief yesterday. We had discussion on the cultivation of loving kindness and great compassion. The loving kindness and the compassion. Maybe I'll briefly to remind all of us. Do you remember on Wednesday or the Wednesday afternoon, I explained 3 mental states which are, the dependent, later mental states are dependent on the previous ones. There are 3. Do you remember? Don't look at your notes. Conviction, aspiration, and concentration. Those are the 3. Conviction or the faith, interchangeable I use. Conviction, aspiration, and concentration. These are the 3 mental qualities. When we have a conviction, then we will have an aspiration. Conviction in this case, conviction on the, with the, what you call the loving kindness or great compassion. Or in the previous topic that we discussed, conviction with the, the shamatha. Once we have those, And also, I think I briefly mentioned, conviction has 3 kinds. Do you remember? So today sounds very much, I'm examining you. Checking your...
Remember the last one, trust.
Trust.
You need to have it, like the wow factor.
Okay, yes, wow factor, that makes sense. In Tibetan, Tangwe Teva, you have this, wow, amazing conviction like that. Once you hear, in this particular case, once you hear the qualities or the benefits of the love and the compassion, your mind blows. Wow, amazing quality. That's first conviction, Tangwe Teva. Second one is Mondeki Teva. That in this case, you would like to have that quality, loving kindness, inspiring, whatever, Ngobardeva, you would like to have. In this case, you like to have love, compassion in your mental continuum. Have a yearning to have it. Then third one is, the trust, ichikiteva. You trust, you have a trust that on the qualities of these mental qualities, like love, compassion in this. These 3 are very, very important. Then if you have these 3 with regard to the love, compassion, then you have an aspiration, dumba, to have it. Teba dumbe kyu, dumba tingin sinji shi. So the conviction is, cause to have an aspiration. Having aspiration is the base to cultivate concentration. In this case, with concentration, not necessarily just single-pointed. In this case, concentration in the sense you focus to cultivate love and compassion. Those 3 are very, very important. These 3 can be applied many other things. But these are the mental, mental, the tools we should have. I mean, for example, many of the classical Buddhist texts, and I'm sure it is the same non-Buddhist ancient Indian spiritual texts, very often the beginning chapter will be is explanation of the topic what the master is writing. For example, this text which I have mentioned many times and quoted several verses, Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. It has 10 chapters. The whole first chapter, I think there were 20-something verses. It is written in verse. 20-something verses, entire first chapter, dedicated to explain the benefits of having altruistic awakened mind, bodhicitta. Why? Exactly to have these 3, the mental states. Once you hear the benefits of the bodhicitta, which in this first chapter, Samba very nicely put it by Shantideva, then you will, when the wow factor is there, then you will get the aspiration to have it. Like many others, like exactly the same. These modern, the big companies, how they advertise their product. very colorful, very flashy, and saying cheap and all. This, in sort of triggers our our mind to have it. Doesn't need to be long. They know exactly how to trigger our mind. Some are very short, just few seconds, 10, 15 seconds. Then next time when you go to the showroom, we'll buy it. Or when you go to the supermarket, click. Most of I was told it's more subconscious. Once we see in our whatever program we're watching, just few seconds, they put in your basket, shopping basket. That's the power, how when we see the goodness. And it is the same in here. So that's here. Now these three are very, very useful to think about. Conviction, aspiration, concentration. In the conviction, what you call now I'm picking up the wow factor. Anyway, that sort of, you are really, amazed to see the quality. Then you will have the conviction, to have it. And then to have the trust. Those are the really important. So we discussed that. Now I'm going to say a little bit on yesterday's our main topic. And this is also connected, once again I briefly touched on. There are two types of meditations that we need to do. One type of meditation is simply something that we haven't realized, we haven't cognized, we haven't understood, to make it to understand, make it to realize, such as nature of impermanence, such as nature of dukkha, such as selflessness, emptiness, the nature of mind. That is one, styles to do the meditation. The other one, which is in here, loving kindness and great compassion. Your mind which is meditating on loving kindness or great compassion, that mind itself tune into love and compassion. Both are meditation. So in here, then we need certain, what you call the prerequisite, the understanding, which we briefly touched on this morning. That verse that I quote, the saying, even if it is slightest suffering, I don't want to experience. Neither others. Even if it is glimpse of happiness, I want to experience. So do that. That is very, very important training to do the meditation on love and compassion. Because as I mentioned yesterday, meditation on love and compassion, the focus is other living beings. And not just other living beings like our loved ones, our family members, like that. Anybody. Whoever turns up in front of our meditation. In front of our meditation, whoever to have this yearning to have a genuine happiness, in that sense love, to have a genuine sort of compassion, in that sense to solve or to relieve the suffering. So in that sense, then this morning, that verse which I explained quite a detail is very, very important to do that. Yesterday afternoon, I explained a little bit with the connection to the renunciation, determination. Do you remember that? Unless if we feel with applying to ourselves, unless if we feel or if we understand, if we have a yearning or wanting or desire to have a fulfillment, genuine happiness, it is very, very difficult to say, I want to work for others to have it. And the same with regard to the compassion. Unless if ourselves to have this yearning to be free from dukkha and the origins of dukkha or any suffering, it is very difficult to say, I want to serve others to be free from suffering and the origins of suffering. So those are the really important. If we do that, then the mind which is meditating itself will turn into love or turn into compassion. More familiarized with that level, more sort of bring that in our conscious level, then our mind itself turn into love and compassion. So those are the things which I thought it may be useful you to remember. So in this context, I want to say a few words. Here I'm talking about classical Buddhist meditation on love, compassion, and also concentration or shamatha. I'm using this particular term classical in the sense, I'm not saying, in order to share genuine empathy towards somebody who needs some our help. We should wait until to see, okay, am I seeing that upon myself? Not in that sense. It is really good to support whatever you can, practically right here and now, even if it is very small. But for the long term, that's why I use the classical, for the long term gradual training to have a long-lasting, love towards all living beings, compassion towards all living beings, without discrimination, without selection, then these are the training that we need to do. Okay, then the last meditation, which we briefly, or in terms of the terms, we briefly touch those. And there are another ways to look at the meditation, placement meditation and analytical meditation. So now here I'm going to talk a little bit on the analytical meditation, because our the topic needs a little bit analysis. That is, this morning along the discussion on the topics on the individual mental states, particularly afflictions, and within the afflictions we started with the hatred, anger, hatred, attachment, and the negative pride. Then I try to connect those three with the. Do you remember? So, sense of I. That's right. Sense of I. So then I said, there is this distortion or misunderstanding or disinformation or misinterpretation of I or self. Along that, mind. Do you remember that? So that's where we are going to go. So to do that, then they're here really to understand whether we really getting making misinterpretation way in which I exist, or nature of I, nature of self. Our mind really misinterpreting, or the actual Buddhist term is, do you remember? Self-grasping, self-grasping self-grasping of the person and self-grasping of the phenomena. That self-grasping of the person, how that self-grasping misinterpret or misapprehend the self or the person. To do that, then, the Buddhist teachers have recommended to do the analytical meditation. Analytical meditation. Analytical meditation will, find out whether, first of all, whether we really misinterpret, way in which the I or the self exists, or mode of existence, the self, or the mind. If so, at what fashion, in which manner that our, we in the sense not necessarily individual, our, self-grasping mind, in which manner, in which fashion it misinterprets, misapprehends. That's here. To do that, then, analytical meditation is useful, helpful. So the analytical meditation, to do the analytical meditation, very effective analytical meditation, then this, the qualities, mental qualities of stillness and the clarities are required. As I mentioned many times, these two mental qualities are the foundation to build, to cultivate, many other, what you call the mental qualities, such as love, compassion, altruism, wisdom, patience, whatever those mental qualities that we list. Conviction, all those, to grow these, then it is very useful to have at least, if it is possible, full shamatha, karma abiding. If full shamatha, or complete shamatha, single pointed is difficult, but a degree of stillness and the clarity is required to do the analysis. Did I give you an example the other day? I think so. One of my teachers used to say very often, if there's no stillness in our mental quality, then whatever analysis we try to do It is like a hammer, or not hammer, chisel, or the axe, which doesn't have any sharp. No matter how much you pull, it is all over the places. If you're chopping a tree, which we used to do, when we are not chopping the tree, this may heartbreaking for the people who are very environment conscious. So when we were young monk, when you reach age 16 or 15, these days I think 16, when we were young, 15 I think, we need to take turn to go to the kitchen. Usually once a month. So you have to go there and help to cook. And there are lots of nice stories. Anyway, so one of the work after lunch, before preparing the dinner usually here these days, and not these days, always served at 5, so relatively early. And so when the lunch is served and taken away by the individual monks to the individual houses, then before you actually prepare the actual either baking or making the what you call the bread or anything, there will be 45 minutes, then chopping the woods. Don't have gas, all those things those days. All the cooks are done with the wood fire. Lots of crying because smoke. That's really, particularly when you are they're making the roti, bread, and every part is coming smoke or is burning out there. Anyway, so the chopping the trees. To chop the tree or the log very effectively, you have to hit the axe at the same place. Then your cutting will be quite successful. If your axe is everywhere, there's no result. Bit here, bit there, bit there. Wood is not chopped. That is the analogy. That is the analogy. To really to get your analysis, on the right target, then there must be a stability in your mental state. When the stability is there, then do the analysis. It will, do the work quite well. So the stability is the base of the foundation. So analysis. Here the analysis, we're talking about mental analysis, and very, very useful that yesterday is our topic. That is logic. Logically argue. Logically argue. That is the particularly initial analysis. So some of these great Indian masters like Nagarjuna and one of his direct disciples, Buddhapalita, and further, like this morning I mentioned the name Chandrakirti, they have sets of logics. Sets of logics to do the analysis. Some are really very much analyzing the entity of what we are analyzing. Some are analyzing its causes. Some are analyzing its results. some are analyzing at the both nature, some are analyzing its dependent nature. There are sets, usually there are 5, and also using nice, what you call the analogies, examples. One famous one is chariot. Chariot or modern car, Ferrari, to understand what is car, what is chariot, where is chariot, manner of existence of chariot or the car. And how we perceive to ourselves the car. So that is here the analytical, you can say the meditation, analytical meditation. So now here, our in terms of the, this morning, what I said to you, attachment, aversion, and negative pride, and many other, all those delusions. But we pointed these 3. All these delusions are coming from, or arise from distorted notion of I, or the self. And technically, it is called as the self-grasping in Tibetan. Here, they are to use the term self-grasping. That self is not referring to our sense of identity. I, or the self, that's individual. We are using the self in Tibetan, dat zin. Although there is this, what you call the pronoun, self is there, but it is not really referring to the individual at that level. Self-grasping, dan zin, in Tibetan. Yeah? In English, anatma. In Sanskrit, anatma. No, anatma? Yeah, anatma. And that is But then if you look at a little bit, that self-grasping related to the I, individual, one's own identity, then it is called self-grasping of person. That self-grasping related to my body, in my case, my feelings, my wishes, my goals, my pains, and that is called self-grasping of phenomena. But both are self-grasping. So first we want to look at this self-grasping. It is a mental state, and according to these Buddhist teachers, it is a distorted mental state. Distorted mental state. Now then, analysis is, analytical meditation is at what level, that mind is distorted, self-grasping, danzin. And the main, best way to do that is to do analysis is done with the, that self-grasping related to the person. So now here is talking about self-grasping of person, or self-grasping of I, or the self. Now then, our basis of analysis is I, or the self, here. this refers to the individual, in this case, with regard to the self-grasping of the person. In that case, with regard to that self-grasping, whether that self-grasping of the person is the distorted mind or not, then the analysis is done with regard to the I or the self. Here. These Buddhist teachers, like Nagarjuna and these Buddhist teachers, when they probe, with regard to, their mind, the manner of, how their mind, how their mind perceives the I or the self, the individual in this case, self as individual, in Tibetan, nga, ta. They have found there's a big distortion. And the distortion is this: that mind, that self-grasping of the person, perceives the I or the individual quite unitary, independent. Unitary, independent. Another term is in and of itself. These all are jargon I'm throwing up on you, but you need to, sort of deconstruct through your own observations. I said, these great, I've done meditation, but I didn't manage to deconstruct this self-grasping. But these great teachers have said, the self-grasping of the person, in my case, my self-grasping of the Tashi. No, my name is Tashi, if you don't know. So, my self-grasping of the Tashi, that mind perceives Tashi is quite unitary. Unitary in the sense, not very much, related to these 5 aggregates. Independent, again, quite close to that. And particularly in and of itself. In the sense, it can survive without all these 5 aggregates, without all this baggage, form, feeling, all what I have, the I or the self can survive, can sustain without all these things. And that is what they call self-grasping of the person. And these teachers found perception of that kind of self, the individual, really brings attachment, aversion, and that negative pride. And here for us is really, to need to do the analysis. It is like very similar to the modern research. That's what they said, and our research is whether that is really, that is the hypothesis. These great teachers have said that. Now it is our work our job to do the research. And it is through analysis, not in a third person, it is on the first person. Our own. I mean, we all know, in one day, in 1 hour, how many, this perception or this thought or this feeling, I, how many times it occurs? Many, many, many times. Occurring of that sense of I, how it occurs, in the occurring, how it occurs, then you need to look at. Is there any that belief or sense of belief or sense of grasp, apprehension? It is quite independent from the body, from the feeling, all the other things, right, we have got here. This term self, Atma in Sanskrit. In Tibetan, Tak, so in English translated self. In this case, when we use this Atma in Sanskrit, in Tibetan, Tak, in English, self, it is not really referring to the pronoun that I or the self. It is mainly referring to this, belief or the, view. There's some kind of independent nature. What they are. Of course we all say, this table exists in front of me with the woods, with the carpenter, with all those things. But still there is some kind of tableness. Stand by itself. Yes, I understand it is made by Indian carpenter, wood, maybe some local wood, and a particular shape, and all these things we cannot, this, it's not independent, it's dependent, many factors. But along that kind of, what we say and what we think, if we closely examine in that, thought process, there's also belief. There's some kind of tableness, regardless of all those dependencies. And they said it is the same kind of notion, grasping, whatever term that you use, concept, also there with regard to the I, or the self, or the individual, doer, experiencer, consumer. In the Buddhist text, or ancient Indian, text, not necessarily only Buddhist. These are the terms which when I came to the West, and read lots of some kind of articles about consumerism. I thought, wow, the Buddhist teachers and Indian teachers already refer to me as consumer. That's what they use. Sawapo, Japapo. Sawapo literally means consumer. So more than 2,000 years ago, they already identified individual as a consumer. Now we are in the top consumer. Doer, Japapo. Moabo, experiencer. We act, we experience the consequences, we consume, and so on and so forth. That is all our so-called I, or the self. When you call I or self, it's relatively abstract. When you use these terms, consumer, doer, not very much abstract. It is really, we feel that's how we are, what we are. So the analysis is very much, initially, particularly in the initial stage, with regard to many times a day or in an hour, the sense of I arises, sense of I. When that sense of I arises, how we perceive that I. And in particularly, when somebody accuses you, which you haven't done, under that circumstances, how you perceive, I was accused. To see in that circumstances, that perception of I become very, very independent from the mind and bodies. Almost what in some of the Tibetan teachers said, almost finger pointable. We perceive in that fashion. In Tibet, I think these days may happening, I don't know, but in Tibet, some of those great teachers, when they take their disciples, their followers to for a long period of teachings, and particularly in this kind of subject, teachings, and give teachings day after day after day, and then some days, okay, go and search your eye. Today there's no class, go and search in your eye. So there is that kind of, very, what is the right word? Very directly to try to challenge. And they said, okay, if you stand on a high cliff, without any safety nets, how are you going to perceive I? Or do the bungee jumping? Very, very, very interesting. One time there was a bungee jumping in Battersea Park in London. I tried. When you got there, that's it, up there. You got all the safety gears, but still, looking down there is not easy. Sense of I. Or, when you are flying, there's a big turbulence, holding your, even your hands are, on the what's called the chairs, armrest, and you realize only you are really holding that very badly after turbulence is stopped. When you look at this pain, those circumstances, you'll see your, sort of sense of I, very, very independent. Believing up there, 35 feet up there, if something happens holding the arm, the arms, you might be survived, but no chance. That is here. So therefore, the point what I'm making is that the next point is having that kind of sense of I, notion of I, the other term is grasping of I. How that sense of I, we have notion of I, something which is independent, in and of itself, leads to have a attachment, leads to have a hatred. How? Need to make a link. Isn't it? So it is this. Once we have this belief or notion, it is something there as an I, very concrete, very sort of in and of itself. Then need to be protected. It comes stronger. Nice example is this. I usually use this example in this context. You have a beautiful, china cup with a beautiful, sauce, and nice cup that you love it. Maybe sentimentally may have lots of value. And that cup is broken by a child, or the same cup is broken by your partner. Which one is more painful? Broken by your partner is more painful, though it's the same cup of china. There's a child, don't know, don't have a concept of the value and all those things. So there's nothing there to be, blame on. But your partner, he knows that. This is given by my grandmother. Okay, you have lots of, how dare to be broken that. But if your child broken in, it is big loss, but what I can do. So there is this, though it's happened, result is the same. Result is the same, but our reaction is very, very different. And it is also the same with something to be attached to. Attachment occurs, when we see something there, not something here, something there. So these great teachers, from their analysis, from their, their observations, they found, there's a big, deep-rooted distortions with regard to our notion of self. I, or the self, or the individual, or the doer, consumer. That distortion leads to have attachment, aversion, all the other, the afflictions. So now to really dismantle that grasping, then it is analytical meditation. Need to analyze, need to, examine. And also, not just use the reasons to do the analysis, as I mentioned earlier. Your feeling or your notion or your experience of I or the self under certain situation, like badly accused you in public. The notion of self is very, very, stands up As I mentioned earlier, one of the Tibetan teachers said, almost finger pointable. So the term is used in this case, I or the self does not exist in that fashion, in that manner or passion that you perceived. You have perceived, you have, grasped, you have sort of, the apprehended. And the I or the self, does not exist in that fashion, is the emptiness of I, emptiness of self. And it is the same to the others. So think about these other useful, helpful to explore. Not that straightforward, but useful to search. Because we all know attachment, aversion, negative pride, these mental states or afflictions, bring pain and difficulties. That we all know. Particularly we know the gross level or more surface level, we all know that. Sometimes people may say, anger may support, may help, may protect. According to the Buddhist teachers' understanding, the anger has no sort of capacity. Anger has no capacity or ability to help us. I want to see your reaction. Very often people say, oh, anger helped me. Not to be bullied by the others. My anger helped me. But this great teacher, Shantideva, in his Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, in the sixth chapter, there's lots of dialogue, how he written this, particularly the sixth chapter, dialogue between anger and the patience. It says, there's no sort of, reliable benefits, to let the anger arise. Okay. So now, then, before we stop for the question and answer, I want to say two things. The mental states that we haven't touched on, but I thought it's important to touch. The first one is in Tibetan, it is called Ichur. In Tibetan, Ichur. And in English, it is quite often translated saying assumption, assuming. Which is, for the to make a good sort of right decision, or the decision that to have a good result, assumption is not very helpful. However, most of our Dharma knowledge, particularly people who follow the Dharma or these kind of teachings, remains, our understanding remains in a level of assumption, very weak. Assumption is the saying, okay, what you call the what example? Yeah, say that meditation on love or meditation on compassion is good for ourselves, good for others, blah blah blah. You have heard. You assume that's the case. You agree. The other day, I teach you people saying, when I say few certain points, you're not. That's the assumption. Why this is assumption? Because that nodding is not based on your own experiences, and it's not based on, the valid cognition. So therefore, it is called assumption, and that levels of the mind, and it is not very, very soothing in the sense, oh yeah, I understand, I know that makes sense, but not very helpful for the long term. Assumption, okay, that's the one thing. Then opposite of the assumption, there are other things, like a valid cognition, which we discussed. Here I want to discuss with you briefly a particular valid cognition. It is called in Tibetan Naljor Musum, and quite often it is translated in English, yogic direct perception. Yogic direct perception. Naljor Musum. This term, don't ask me yoga, it is, the yogic, this is the Sanskrit term, the Tibetan term, which they translated, Naljor. Naljor. Now has a connotation of pure or perfect. Jor has a connotation of reached, arrived. Naljor. Naljor. So here, yogic direct perception. It is a very, very reliable, very, very trustworthy, perception. But it needs to be cultivated. So it is said, Rangiten based on that we discussed earlier, shamatha and based on union of shamatha and vipassana, that's the base. That's the base. Based on that, once the individual, sort of meditate on in this case, say they meditate on understanding of selflessness, emptiness, that we discussed briefly. Once individual, based on this union of shamatha, vipassana and shamatha and vipassana, based on that kind of mindset, then when the individual analyzes on the nature of, in this case, nature of emptiness, then once the meditator minds, that particular meditator minds realizes, in this case, impermanence, emptiness, without any, veil, without any sort of mediation, it realizes directly, and that is called yogic direct perception. Yogic direct perception. Yogic in the sense that mind reached at the correct direct perception on the subject of, in this case, the emptiness. So the intention means the base is stable. Base is stable in the sense, in this case, the union of shamatha and vipassana, that union comes in. So you meditate on emptiness, initially with the analysis, probe, analyze, and that analysis, gone into more deeper and more subtler and subtler, then eventually that mind, that meditative mind, turn into direct perception, and that mental state is called, direct, yogic direct perception. And from the Buddhist point of view, that is one of the most, what you call the powerful realization. Powerful in the sense that realization, that cognition can interact, directly interact to the self-grasping that we had discussed briefly earlier. So those are the just glimpse of what I thought to say, but but may give you some seeds, put you in your mind some seeds. Okay. Now, any questions? Okay. First few. Yeah.
When you were referring to assumption.
Assumption. Oh.
Yeah. Were you talking? Were you kind of referring to the types of invalid cognition?
Invalid cognition. Not necessarily. No.
Oh.
No.
So you were saying the last two mental states.
Oh.
In terms of what things you were teaching earlier, like either attachment and aversion, or last two in what list?
Okay, this last list, two that I've given. The first one is called assumption. It is not necessarily mistaken. It is not necessarily distorted, wrong. It is simply assuming what he said is right.
It's lazy.
Laziness. That's true.
But where does it fit in your schema?
Oh, this I don't know.
I think the question is it one of the afflictions out
Is
of
it,
the six?
one of affliction, are you saying?
Yes.
It's not really necessarily
It's not
affliction.
part of that list.
No. It's not attachment, it's not anger, it's not negative pride, it's not self-grasping. So far we have discussed those things. No, it is just assuming, which happening all the time. Most of our, buying gadgets, I want to tell you my story. When I first came, my early time in the UK, there's this fashion, fashion of ripping all the carpets. In your home, your flat or whatever, in the early stage, there are lots of carpets because to get the home, whatever fashion, I don't know. When I arrived in the early 1990s, when you buy a flat or house, first thing is to rip the carpet and to also sand the wooden floor. But I heard now it's going back. Anyway, so the point what I'm making here is this, assuming that's the better, bare wooden floor is better than with a carpet, but then later in the winter you realize with a carpet is better. So it is assumption. You assume, it's better. Another one, also I teach this a lot with some of my friends, who have a family, or not necessarily to have a family, but have a big kitchen. I mean, what's the right word? It might be still going on. On the television, there are lots of, the programs, making cakes, making foods, and like that. And one of the main reasons I was told, they are colluded with those companies who sells all those small machines, or the machine or tools, making or cutting, chopping, all those things, or this very powerful one. But when there was, I think 2001 or 2, there was a research. How many of those things are in the kitchen, never used? There's 40-something% is never used, but still in the kitchen drawer. So this is assumption. Assuming, it's good for me, I'm going to make it a delicious cake, but most of the time, no. So the assumption not necessarily is, mistaken or distorted. It is in a belief sense, not accurate, not valid. Anyway, that's all.
I do understand about assumptions.
You mean with the kitchen?
But what I don't understand
Okay.
is if those are the last two mental states, what are the other mental states that you've gone through? What scheme, what do they fit into?
As far as I consciously know, I'm not making some kind of package.
Okay.
I'm just picking up things here and there and to share with you. Because if I go with the traditional package,
It's very long.
that's long. And also may cause lots of confusion. Down there.
This is about ignorance. Since it is the root cause of ignorance is the third poison, together with attachment and aversion. It is said to be the root cause of the self-grasping to a person. And it is also said as co-emergent with this idea of self of a person. Would you please say something about it?
Can you say it once again? Because I didn't get it full.
It is said to be ignorance, it is said
Ignorance, okay.
ignorance co-emergent together with the self-grasping to a person.
Okay, good question. Yes, ignorance is one of the terms that we use very loosely. Very loosely. Most of the unknowing, most of our in a mental state which is not knowing the things, not necessarily mistakenly apprehending, all those mental states are the term called ignorance. But here we are talking about a particular ignorance, that is self-grasping in general, and particularly self-grasping of the person. And that is ignorance, that is a particular ignorance. Ignorance, not just ignorance in the sense not knowing the nature of the self, or mode of the self, or how the self exists, not just not knowing, it actively misinterpreting. That's the point. actively misinterpreting or actively misapprehending the self or the I. In that sense, it is very serious ignorance. Just not knowing, although it's ignorance, but it is not that serious. Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay.
The innate.
Innate.
The innate or
Okay.
learned.
Okay. Okay. Now you are opening Tandorin box. Tandorin, you say? Pandorin box. Is that a tandoori box? Okay. That is Indian food. Take away. Tandoori box.
Projecting aroma.
I'm not hungry. I have a big lunch. So, I mean, you're right. I didn't go in that direction because I'm worried about if I use too much jargon, it may become pure jargon, inherent. You said that, or it is inherent, or it comes later. I think other day I briefly touched on that. You know that in Tibetan, the term is used, "Henge." Inborn, inherent, language. Gunda, learn later, adopt later, through the culture, through the encountering different philosophical views. So that is the lady's main question. I'm not sure whether I'm going to go there. Anyway. The Buddhist teachers have said, with this regard to the self-grasping of the person, or in general self-grasping, and in particular our main topic, self-grasping of the person, they are both at certain level, inborn or innate, but at the certain stages, more like we learn later, through the encountering different belief systems, different philosophical things, we learn later. So that's how. Sorry, it's not going to satisfy you, but that's how we'll leave it here. Another? Yeah.
Rinpoche, I really like that, how you explained 3 different stages of conviction.
Sorry?
3 different stages of conviction. So in terms of shamatha concentration, I think I had the wow factor and the aspiration. I know one day we'll get to concentration. But when it comes to compassion meditation, I'm not able to understand how to have the wow factor because it's based on assumption, and I've tried it many times, and even if I do practice like Tonglen, at some level I know that it's good for me, that's why I do it, but how can I have conviction that it's actually helping remove the suffering of others, because it's not something I can test, so it's just based on assumption. But because of that, it's not like coming naturally to me. I just have to convince myself it's good for me, that's why I do it. So how can I naturally have that wow factor when it comes to compassion?
Okay. Here one of the challenges is, when we say all living beings, all sentient beings, then it becomes very abstract. Then when we do the meditation, we don't feel we are not doing anything to the all living beings. So there are ways, the training itself, although that is the goal and the aim, and should have that kind of mindset. But in the actual training, one-to-one. One-to-one. For example, in the meditation on compassion, although we can say all living beings is your object of the meditation, to be free from suffering, initial training is a neutral person. On a neutral person, focus that, to be free from suffering. How you feel it. But here it is important to remember one of your questions that you, there is a element of that. And I will come to here slightly different practice of generosity. The practice of generosity to be perfected, it is not that you relieve all the poverties in the world. Although that is the case, that is the mind training. But it is not you sort of, eradicate all the, poverties in the world. It is your mind to have that kind of strength. Yeah? So similar to that, now to bring, that is the, practicing, perfecting generosity. It is the same if you bring same concept in here. When you are meditating on compassion and the focus is all living beings, but in the earliest stage your training is on a neutral person, and the mind aspect of that mind is to be free from suffering. To be free from suffering. But when you train that neutral person who is whatever suffering, he will
realize that sense of self is wrong. Is what this teaching is showing, that we are mistaking this sense of self.
Okay.
Instead of doing, there are so many other practices, Tava practice, Guru Rinpoche practice, then all the 6 paramitas, there are so many other practices. Would it be correct to say that it would be simple just to realize there is no that sense of self as we imagine it to be? Would that be sufficient? I'm just intellectually thinking.
I don't want to reduce your spiritual activities. All those practices that you have counted right now, they are very, very useful, meaningful practice to be done. And also sometimes, particularly in the modern time, it is very important, be careful in a sense of self. To say sense of self is wrong, because there are many people lacking with this sense of self and suffering a lot. Particularly, when I was abbot in Sarah, I think 2023, I know a Japanese, when I first met her, she was a very young lady at the Bell Language School. And we haven't met each other for a long time now, nearly 30 years something, but we have a connection, we write. And she sent me, through email, she sent me in English, her English is very good, sent me an article in one of the challenges that young Japanese, particularly girls, are facing. This sense of lack of sense of self or the low self-esteem. That's normally we use. And lack of sense of value to oneself. And this, the article was written on the basis of very thorough research. So, some of the Buddhist or the terminology, like self-cherishing. In Tibetan it works, but when we use this in English, and particularly to the modern time, it's not that easy. It may get mistakenly understood to say, oh, don't cherish yourself. It's not the case. So like this sense of self, I won't say just sense of self is wrong or mistake. I would say if I use precisely, that earlier I used self-grasping. That is a little bit better, to use that kind of term. But in reality, or according to those great Buddhist teachers, for us ordinary people, even in our sense of self, there is a element of distortion. That is right, but we need to be very careful how to use these terms. Is it okay?
Yeah, I meant that if you realize the sense of self is, in Buddhist teaching, is wrong, empty.
Yeah.
If you realize that, isn't that enough as a practical?
If we are able to realize that, the emptiness of self related to our identity or our self, that will be great. But I will not exchange with that to the practices that you are doing. I'm worried about maybe few months or few years later, we may meet or, oh, I blame you, saying, I give up all my practices because you said that's better. No, I'm joking. Anyway, turn on our prayers, yeah. Page 270. Om Je Tsering Pama Doma La Cha Se Lo Cha Se Doma Nyuma Pama Jene Geche Lo Da Dama Jige Sumbe Chuje Sheji Khensur Jewa Lene Juma Cha Se Dongge Tawa Kendo Kawa Jene Sibe Shema Kama Tonda Soba Namji Rado Chele Rabama Chaze Seme Chune Tete Peme Chame Nabaratema Jemba Sunju Kadu Shewa Sewa Sande Chuyu Nima Chaze Tejin Shebe Tsudo Taye Nambara Jawa Chema Malu Paru Chimba Tope Jawe Seji Shindu Tema Chanze Tuda Rahon Yeke Duda Choda Namka Kama Jide Tumbo Shakti Nende Luba Meba Kuba Numa Chanze Jaji Mela Tsamba Lola Naso Wanju Chema Jombo Rola Tisana Nijun Soki Dune Dema Chanze Teche Chatan Peki Paro Tugo Raku Joma Ego Yenja Shakti Nende me pa tu pa shin tu pa ma chan se tu re ji pa chen po de ye pa o nam pa ra cho ma che je shen ne chong ye ten se tra o tam je ma lu se ma chan se kun jo som se cha je se me tu ka nam pa ra ke ma lu cho je ko lo jen pe rang je we je so nam tu ma chan se ra tu ka wa je pe u je we je chen wa pe ma she pa ra che tu da ra ye de da je ke wan du se ma chan se sa chi kyong we so tham je gu ba ne ma ni ma cho nye ye wa yi ge hong gi pong ba tham je na pa ra cho ma chan se ta we tung bo o jen tian ba tham je shin do pa ma re be che ne lo ba me ta pa ra shin do ra wa se ma chan se ke be ta ma bar we chen we ne ne ma ye ja yung kum ku ne ko ke ta ye pong ne na pa ra cho ma chan se sa chi ma la cha ke te ji nu jin sha ki dong ma cho nye chen se ye ke hong ke ren pa dung po nam ni ke ma chan se te ma ke ma shi ma nyang ngen de shin chu yu ni ma so wa om da yang da den be ti pa chen po chong pa ni ma chan se ku ne ko ra wa ka we da ye lu ne na pa ra ke le ma yi ge chu be nga ni ku be re pa hong le to ma ni ma chan se tu re sham ni da be hong ge na be sa be ni ma re ra me da ra da de chen chi ten sum na yo wa ni ma chan se la yi so yi na be re da da chen cha na na ma ta ra ni ju pe ge yi ge do na ma lu pa ne se ma chan se la yi so nam je bo la da miang chi te ma gu ne gu cha ga wa chi chi zhe da me la ma ngen ba se le ma chan se ni ma da wa ge be shi ni po la we ra wa se ma ha ra ni ju tu da ra yi shin do cha be rin ne se le ma chan se ti ni sum nam ge be shi we tu da yang da de ma den da ro na ni jin so na chong ba tu re ra cho ni ma za we ha ji de ba chan se wa ni shu oi